Hello, Sable here again, covering another match from Uber's Premier League, another Week 1 match. This time we've got Unowndragon versus NotVeryCake, or Cake Connoisseur in this replay. Unowndragon is on the Defiant Durians, Cake is on Dangerous Dracovish. Now, this matchup is kind of interesting because Unowndragon, very old school player, very likely to stick to the kinds of Mewtwo and Mew sets that were popular a few years ago. So probably a lot of like Ice Beam, Psychic, Amnesia, Recover, Mewtwo. Though still has like shown some adaptation to more modern stuff. Notably, that avatar that Unowndragon is using, a prize from a past UPL win with Manly Melmetals. Meanwhile, Cake, more, I'd say like more adapted to modern trends, but also a player who very much kind of picks a few things and sticks with them, likely to kind of reuse the same ideas, not like the same exact 6 Pokemon, but probably going to bring similar ideas between games. Um, Beyond that, known for tending to like counter team opponents pretty hard based on whatever they brought the prior match. So I guess we'll see if that happens here. Ultimately, I think I'd expect Unowndragon to play more like conservative, slow teams, and Cake to probably play a bit of a mix of more modern stuff with more explosion users and some of the more old school stuff. Let's hop into game one and just see how it goes. So right off the bat, Mewtwo lead from Unowndragon, shutting me up immediately about playing older, more conservative stuff because that's a lot newer of an idea. Gengar from Cake. So usually lead Mewtwo is going to be running like Psychic, then one of Blizzard or Fire Blast. I don't know if Fire Blast has really caught on very far beyond me using it. Like I like it, but I think a lot of people still stick to Blizzard. Maybe it depends on how much Jinx the opponent uses. And then often if it's in lead, it's going to have like Thunder Wave and then Self-Destruct. People have been known to lead like less aggressive Mewtwo sets, just try to scare off Gengar and then double switch out. So I think this turn one will probably tell us a lot about what kind of Mewtwo this is. Cake switching out, Unowndragon staying in and clicking Blizzard. I like the Blizzard click because Psychic's not going to KO Gengar unless you crit anyway, and Blizzard and a Psychic is always range, so if they get greedy and stay in anyway, like yes, you miss out on that 25% chance to crit them out, but you still just KO them if they miss the first one, and of course it's just a better move to cover switches. So critting Mewtwo on entry, staying in, going for another one and critting again, probably there's going to be a T-Wave from Cake, because otherwise switching Mewtwo into a lead 2 like this would be pretty scary. So Cake definitely on the back foot, but if this has Recover, Unowndragon could boom and take the trade, but that does feel a little behind. Cake booming instead, getting lucky with a crit, so that helps equalize pretty immediately, and Gengar probably going to come back in to get sleep. Unowndragon sending Tauros, good move. Tauros and Gengar speed tie, so it's pretty scary for Gengar to stay on that and go for it. A crit Earthquake could just put it down. Cake going to egg on a pretty telegraphed Earthquake. Now Unowndragon probably just going to swing at this and see how far he can get before getting put to sleep. Gets a crit but goes to sleep. And now at this point, it's looking like Unowndragon's got a pretty aggressive team, probably has some physical offense supported by more supporting Mewtwo and Mew sets with Explosion. Cake's team, hard to say too much yet, but Gengar, Boom on Mewtwo, and Executor suggests some kind of more boom spammy team. Could have like the last Pokemon Articuno or Slowbro to try to finish the game. Could also just be like a standard, more physical offense setup behind this, or even like a Sweeper Mew. But we'll probably get a bit more detail as the next couple of mons come out. Zapdos from Unowndragon, so really like leaning more into this physical offense, and Cake just calls it and booms on entry, which is a nice move here, I think. Gengar coming back into pressure. Don't know if I like Gengar being the choice here necessarily, but maybe just she has nothing else faster than Zapdos. So I do think that says she probably doesn't have like a Tauros or something, because Tauros would probably be a better send here. Unowndragon trying to call a boom, but not calling it, and gonna switch back and take even more damage. This is why Gengar can be such a problem in Ubers, especially if you don't have Mewtwo anymore. Because look just how much damage it's getting for free here. And Cake Nightshades again, which I think is the right move. You could like try to boom and call this, but ultimately a 100% sleeping Gengar still can do something later, and you don't want to miss boom and then give up sleep. Now, hard switching Mew into Executor, I think, is an interesting play. A lot of Mew sets just don't have a move that hits Executor in the first place. And doing this, being kind of blasé about Mew possibly taking Stun Spore on entry, suggests that Mew is not the win con. It probably is another Explosion T-Wave Pokemon here. Because otherwise, risking that is really painful. So gets in, I'm going to guess this has like something to hit Executor, or it's just going to T-Wave. And there's the wave. So Cake definitely like ahead at this point. Unowndragon going to Zapdos, thinking that this is just like T-Wave, Swords Dance, Earthquake, Soft Boiled, and therefore is walled. I don't think that sounds quite right, but it could be accurate. And goes to Golem, so we don't know. The presence of a ground type does make it more fair to like run Mono Earthquake Mew because you don't have to worry about Zapdos in this case, but you still have to worry about like Articuno or Dragonite, which means it may not be Mono Earthquake. Either way, at this point, the advantage is looking brutal for Cake against Unowndragon because there's just nothing that's really going to come into Golem well here. Sacks the Tauros, or well, intending to sack the Tauros, but Body Slam was a pretty reasonable click there. Cake getting out to Snorlax, which I think is a little bit interesting. Like you could go to Mew, for example, and make it a little bit more painful for Executor to come back in, whereas here it can kind of come in and threaten to boom. But Unowndragon going to Snorlax. Here comes Gengar as a pivot. It's a pretty reasonable play. You kind of don't really need it at this point super much. Like you just need to hold off Executor sleep. But using it to pivot into Mew, just trying to get in without getting body slammed. And it looks like it could be Mono Earthquake or it could be Boom. This team has, if the Mew is Boom, this is 6 Boom users. So it could just be that, or it could be soft boiled. Okay, so I do want to talk about that. That's a little bit interesting. So 5 Booms and then a Mono Earthquake Mew means like this team really can't use all 5 Booms in a lot of cases because the Mew could just immediately lose the game to the wrong Pokemon being last. Anything from Executor that gets a couple Psychic drops to any Flyer could just win the game. This team looks really, really, really weak to Articuno because the Mew can't hit it, the Golem gets one-shotted, the Snorlax loses, the Executor almost gets one-shotted. Gengar is usually going to sleep, and the Mewtwo is probably recoverless. It's probably like Amnesia, Blizzard, Thunderwave, Boom. So this team, pretty rough in any Flyer that isn't Zapdos. Luckily, I mean, there is a Zapdos on Unowndragon's side. Meanwhile, Unowndragon's team, like we know the last is Imbue, so this is like just very classic, bring a bunch of good Mons, but putting the Mewtwo in lead is a bit interesting. Like you could have led the Tauros or Zapdos. Still, I think like it can be nice to get off to a good start with aggression, and it may again like also be like a read on what Cake is going to lead. I don't actually know what Cake tends to lead off the top of my head, but I do remember seeing a fair bit of Jinx from her, so like a Psychic Fire Blast Mewtwo would cover that in Gengar. So Unowndragon might have had a read on something in the Scout here, but either way, Zapdos comes in, doubling out to Executor is a nice move, but this seems really hard. Like you need a lot of those doubles before you're going to be able to win this. Pivoting through Gengar again, I assume here comes the Mew on a Psychic. I'm kind of surprised that Unowndragon hasn't at any point tried to call one of these with a Stun Spore, especially on that turn. Like if Gengar woke up, you have a 75% chance to Stun Spore it anyway, and then you just open up Sleep again. So I don't know if I love clicking Psychic. I think going for a Stun Spore or something is like one of the only ways that you're really going to make any progress and win here because Golem just kind of dominates what's left of this team now that the egg is so beat up from switching out and in, and now that the Mewtwo and Tauros are down. So I don't really see Unowndragon's win path anymore. I think just too many chances got squandered earlier. Squandered's a harsh word. It's more so just there were some momentum losses that I think didn't need to happen, some chances to push that weren't exploited enough. And so now we're just in the situation where Golem is going to sit here and clean up. If the Mew was paralyzed, I think there'd be more opportunities to make plays with Unowndragon's own Mew, which now is just going to have to make its way through 3 things on its own. It's a big ask. Now, Golem, notably just weaker than Rhydon, doesn't KO, so that did need that body slam paralysis, or it would have been taking a nice chunk, or possibly risking a boom on Mew coming in. But now Unowndragon finally brings out the Mew. The fact that it's coming out so late seems to suggest to me that it could be a sweeper Mew, like a Hyper Beam plus Earthquake one. We'll see. I also kind of get the feeling that it's not. I think that would have been the right thing for a team like this, and maybe you run a little more T-Wave on it, but I also get the distinct feeling that's not what was being run here. But we'll see. Golem getting paralyzed, kind of inconsequential. I don't feel like there's much that can go wrong here unless it paralyzes twice, because just booming is still pretty good. Yep, and there goes the Snorlax. Crit didn't really matter. I think that would have done enough damage to be in Mew Earthquake range anyway. But now that the Mew is the last thing left, the Snorlax can kind of just body slam it and then explode. Or if she has explosion, no wait, she doesn't have explosion on Mew, so can't do that. But now that this has happened, this is just free. Now you just explode and it's over. Or don't, but now you definitely explode. There's no reason not to. Yeah, and then Cake wins game 1 because of that. So I think there were some interesting moves made early on. And I think really where Unowndragon started letting the game slip away was Executor switching in and out of Gengar. I think you just have to stay in and make the call, and even if it booms, unless it crits you, the egg still has like 40-ish% left. It would have gotten sleep pretty easily on Mew or Golem later on a like revenge kill situation. I think just letting it take 75% like that just let the game get out of control too fast. I think the Mew maybe could have been used earlier, especially if it's this Mono Earthquake Thunder Wave set. Like, you kind of need this to support the Tauros instead of just like throwing the Tauros in and then clicking buttons. I don't know. I get sending the Tauros into the Gengar when Unowndragon did that way back. This was pretty early on. If we go back to here, right here, I think like given what the team was, I honestly think you needed to make the call to sack Zapdos, or better yet, right here. Most people run an Executor. I think right here, Zapdos could have been doubled in and it would have drill packed and then Golem would have come in. But then you have a chance to make a play with your own Executor or call out Golem switching back out to a sleeper to try to punish the Zapdos. Something like that. So I think there were some missed opportunities, and I think the game slipped out of Unowndragon's hands, but ultimately Cake wins game 1. So on to game 2. Starmie lead versus Tauros lead. So interesting matchup. I think a little bit less so in Ubers than in OU, where Tauros lead sometimes gets used to bait out Thunder Wave to try to catch it with a Chansey or what have you. But in Ubers, just because a lot of teams have very prevalent use of Explosion, you kind of can just T-Wave and trust that you're going to be able to pressure later. Starmie can also just hit the Tauros, and Tauros becomes a lot less effective when there's a 130 base speed Pokemon that'll just knock it out from 50%. But we'll see. Going to the Mewtwo, trying to catch a T-Wave right away, but Unowndragon just clicks Blizzard. The Mewtwo hard switching in like that suggests that she's not worried about Mewtwo taking paralysis, which could suggest either something like a T-Wave Blizzard Boom Mewtwo that just wants to force an opposing Mewtwo and boom, or something slower like a Barrier 2, but I don't think that's really her style, so I think the former is more likely. So I'd expect T-Wave coming in here. T-Bolt, okay. So that could be like a Amnesia Blizzard Thunderbolt Recover Mewtwo, something that she's willing to play slower instead of going for a sweep, where it's just going to come in, click buttons on opposing mons that are weak to one of those 2 moves, maybe set up later after getting paralyzed. Goes out to Egg here, expecting a Mew that's maybe not able to hit it very well, and Unowndragon also doubles to Egg. So interesting turn. I think it's pretty expected that Mewtwo is going to get out, so you can double on it. Don't know if Egg is where I'd go because opposing Egg is a pretty likely switch to come into Mew as well. Maybe the right play here might have involved switching to like Starmie and then to Egg or something like that, try to set up a situation, but this Mewtwo could very easily have Blizzard, which makes it hard to get Egg in anyway. Now, I am curious if they go for the 50-50 here, just play the speed tie, or if one of them decides to sack something else. If one of them did, my bet would be Unowndragon sacking Starmie, because Starmie is generally not super valuable in Ubers, but my guess is they're both going to stay and go for it. And they do. Kick gets lucky this time and wins the tie. And this looks tough for Unowndragon because probably that Egg is the only sleeper on the team. And now also letting the Tauros in is no good. The wake up is definitely lucky. If Cake didn't get that critical hit, this would look really, really bad for her. But now that Egg is in Hyper Beam range, it is a roll, but it's a good roll. And that makes this turn tricky. It's pretty reasonable to stay in with Egg and click Sleep Powder because the Tauros is probably not going to launch a Hyper Beam this early and just hit Starmie and get T-waved and beaten down. It also is pretty reasonable to launch Hyper Beam anyway because this is Ubers and Tauros is no longer like the tier decider. And if you just crit, you just delete something for free. My guess though is that Cake is going to body slam and Unowndragon is going to either get out or stay in, but I think I'd probably lean toward getting out. I do think a lot of people like to stay in these spots and just try to call them on it, so we'll see. But he does get out, and Cake does indeed click slam, gets a crit. No para though, but this is not a great situation for Unowndragon. Probably going to lose the Starmie for T-Wave. So this is worth it, I would say. T-Waving Tauros is really important because it stops it from being a huge threat to your Mew and Mewtwo. It has to use Leer or something to reapply paralysis before it can be super threatening like it can when it's not paralyzed. I do think T-Wave is the right call there. I think Cake is always going to stay in and keep pushing. And at the same time, recovering just has so much chance to go wrong. If you get paraslammed on the next hit, you're at 50% and paralyzed, and then you're in Hyper Beam range. And at that point, I think Tauros is a lot more willing to just let it fly. So I do think you just have to take the wave. A little bit unfortunate for Unowndragon that Tauros crit twice like that, but also waking up the Egg is fairly lucky anyway. So sends in Snorlax, goes for a double switch to try to pressure with Sleep again. I do like that move a lot, but here I think you definitely have to Psychic because like Tauros is probably coming back in one time. And Unowndragon calls it. Good move. Unfortunately, doesn't get a special drop or a crit, which combined is like almost 50% odds. And if that 50% happens, this Tauros is either dead or forced out. But here now it's a lot more risky. Another slam coming in, does paralyze. So that's lucky for Cake because that Egg very easily could have gotten sleep later. Choosing to preserve it is interesting. So at this point, as the teams are starting to get a little more revealed, we see a Starmie, Executor, a Mew that almost certainly has T-Wave, and a Snorlax from Unowndragon. Hard to say exactly what kind of team that would be or what the last Pokemon would be. Like Starmie plus Egg really leaves itself open to anything. With 3 paralysis spreaders like this, it could be a Rhydon, it could be a Slowbro, it could be an Articuno, it could be a Zapdos. Like it can be really anything in that last spot. Obviously, there's also a Mewtwo. On Cake's side, we've seen Tauros, Snorlax, Executor, and then a Mewtwo that has Thunderbolt and probably does not have T-Wave. I'm guessing it's going to be an Amnesia 2 attacks recover type of Mewtwo here. So again, a little bit hard to say what the last two are going to be. It seems like this team is set up around Mewtwo being the thing that wins, but it just as easily could be like Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Thunderwave, Recover, which is obviously not so much a sweeper, it's just like a support mon with good coverage. I think when we see the Mew set or the other unrevealed Pokemon, that'll say a lot about where her win con is focused. But again, like as with Unowndragon, it's just like a bunch of good Pokemon without anything that's super revealing as to the intent of the team yet. Snorlax comes in, so just going to trade hits back and forth. Unowndragon probably thinking of booming here. Or, okay, since you hit counter, now Hyper Beam is on the table. That's a nice counter, calling her out on that move. And Rhydon comes in on a potential boom or Hyper Beam, catches a Hyper Beam, and now this Lax is either dead or something's going to have to switch into a Body Slam from Rhydon. And going to egg is interesting. So doubling out on incoming executor, like honestly, that's a really nice play. Egg is usually going to be a switch into Rhydon, and it makes sense to preserve an unparalyzed Snorlax to threaten the boom later. So I actually really like this for Unowndragon. I'll like it even more if he's crazy and clicks Psychic on the Snorlax coming in to absorb sleep. Just because sleep powder through paralysis is a pretty tough thing to land. I don't think Cake will ever stay in here because sacrificing a full 100% Executor to sleep or boom when there's a Rhydon on the enemy team is just a really big mistake. So at this point, with seeing Unowndragon's last Pokemon, the Rhydon, me egged on. This is like standard OU kind of bring, except now we're in Ubers. I would guess that means this is a T-Wave Earthquake Mew because Rhydon covers the Zapdos matchup. Starmie kind of covers for Articuno, but it's probably going to sleep in most games. And I'm guessing the last is going to be like a really standard Mewtwo, like something older like Ice Beam, Psychic, Amnesia, Recover, just because that's his style. I don't think this team necessarily has like a set goal or win path, and maybe it's more of just a trade effectively and then win with Mewtwo or Mew type of thing, which I think is how teams used to be a lot more. There was maybe a little bit less focus behind it and more of just play better and get luckier. Cake side, Tauros Snorlax like suggests a bit of a physical offense angle, but it really can be anything in back. So I guess we'll see a little more soon. Now that the Rhydon is revealed, I think it kind of gives away what Unowndragon's running. And the Snorlax does come in to try to sack to Executor Sleep. We'll never know what Unowndragon clicked, but deciding not to sack the Executor. And I think that might be a bit of a mistake. I don't think you want to switch Rhydon and a Body Slam here, because if you get paralyzed, you're super behind. And there it is. Now this is really tough. This Rhydon just lost all of its threat level versus Mew and Mewtwo. At least it paraslams the egg. Like that helps for sure. But here, Cake's just going to click Psychic, and if it special drops or crits this egg, it's out of the game. No drop, so it's a speed tie. And she chooses not to risk it, which I think is the correct move, but again, just get some good luck going her way. So this egg that Unowndragon managed to get in twice when it was nearly dead ended up doing nothing just because of some unfortunate luck. Mewtwo comes in, and now we'll figure it out. And okay, looks like I was on point. This is probably Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic, Recover. So at this point, the Mew set for Cake is going to determine a lot here of how this game is going to go. If this is not a T-Wave Mew, this could be a very lost game. But on a team like this, I would think it's almost certainly a T-Wave Mew, and if it is, it's 1000% going to click it here. Even with Rhydon potentially coming in to absorb it, you're not really scared of that. So I guess we'll see. I can't think of a reason this Mew wouldn't be T-Wave. And as for the Mewtwo, I do wonder what the play is going to be here. I think probably you just go to Snorlax and blow something up. At this point, there's really no bad target to hit, and you don't want Mewtwo to take paralysis for free right here. Snorlax in, Swords Dance clicked. So that can't, there's no way this is T-Wave. You would have definitely clicked it. Or this is Swords Dance Hyper Beam as the alternative. If it's Swords Dance Hyper Beam, I can see making that read as a real play. If it's not, if Hyper Beam doesn't come out here, then I'm going to say this was either a misplay or a builder error. Most likely. It switches out. Okay. So this Mew, based on that play, it's going to be Swords Dance, one of the non-Hyper Beam attacks, and then either Boom or the other non-Hyper Beam attack. For context, I'm talking about Body Slam and Earthquake here. And then Soft Boiled, I guess. I think at this point it's pretty clear it doesn't have T-Wave because like Swords Dance there, if you don't have Hyper Beam, doesn't really make sense. No Body Slam click on Mewtwo either, so like really being certain that Unowndragon's gonna switch out. I really wonder what this could be. And if this isn't T-Wave and the last Pokemon isn't something with T-Wave like a Zapdos, I am really wondering what the idea behind this team is. So Unowndragon just immediately rips the Boom, which I think is the correct move to make regardless here. And now playing the Speed Tie, I really don't love this, but I do think it's a consequence of this team just like kind of lacking any oomph. you've got presumably a no boom Mew that just has Earthquake as an attacking move, and then Egg, Lax, and then where is your offense after that with this Rhydon being paralyzed? I just think like being forced in the situation is kind of a sad outcome of the way this team was built. And clicking Amnesia, so not even trying for the tie, I really disagree with that. I think you always go for it because Amnesia is not going to KO 63% Mewtwo with any move. Even Blizzard caps at 49. So don't love this. And Cake also amnesiaing, so they're both signaling a commitment to playing an Ice Beam Freeze War, and that tells me that her last move is Ice Beam on Cake's side. I think team builder choices really put them both in this situation. Cake more so, I would say, than Unowndragon. Unowndragon's team, like at least like you've got a T-Wave move, you've got a Starmie, like you've got some options for paralysis. While it seems like Cake's team maybe only has the egg on the whole team that can do paralysis. So we're gonna see a freeze war like the old days, and that really is sad. RBY Ubers has evolved past this, but sometimes in games you end up in situations where maybe your best move is playing to get luckier than the opponent. And that can happen. You can get crit, full parrot, etc. over and over. Like, I don't think Unowndragon ends up in the situation if the Executor didn't paralyze repeatedly earlier because it would have gotten sleep on something or boom on something. And maybe that was a better game state. Cake's team, I really just don't know why the Mew doesn't have T-Wave or why there wasn't some other T-Waver or something that came in here instead of having to play this. So whoever wins this freeze war is probably going to win the game. Yeah, not much more can be said about that. I'm really curious what Cake's last is going to be. I am going to guess it's something that gets nuked by Ice Beam. And they keep going. Cake only went to +2, which means she's going to have to recover more, and a recover fail. Ugh. So this actually was an avoidable recover fail in that she would have been able to know at the start of turn, but you still click recover there, I think, because if you lose the speed tie and get ice beamed, then you're going to be able to recover up. And if you win the tie like this, then sucks to be you. So a bit of bad luck there, but ultimately, like, that's kind of the same thing as losing the freeze war, where it's just like a very unlikely event that eventually is going to happen. Unowndragon not hitting yet is interesting. So Cake needs to either like lose a speed tie or win the next speed tie, but the freeze comes through anyway. So recover fail kind of didn't matter, except that it made Cake not click Ice Beam a couple times. But at this point, I would say Cake has lost. I'm very curious to see what the Mew or the last Pokemon is going to click when it comes in, because that'll say more about if this is a team building mistake or something else. So Mew takes the hit. Soft boiled. So, okay. Swords Dance soft boiled. And then I'm guessing that it is two of the more mediocre damage attacks like Body Slam plus Earthquake. If you have T-Wave, you clicked it here. There's no reason not to. That makes it more likely that you actually can stall the rest of these Ice Beams. Yeah, so there's just no reason for this. You're probably not going to stall 5 more of them in a row just off of recovery without a T-Wave to give you a paralysis in between, although that helps for sure. 3 more Ice Beams. Click Psychic once and looking for a drop or something. Yeah, Cake's not going to stall this, and the fact that it's not T-Wave and she's not clicking Body Slam. Okay, there's a Body Slam. I was like, what is the move if you're not doing that? So Swords Dance Softball, Body Slam, and I'm guessing the last has to be Earthquake, because even like ripping an explosion here and just hoping you crit is a better chance here than whatever this is. And this tells me the last doesn't have T-Wave either, because surely you go for it before this Mewtwo gets the +4 and just wipes out your team. Let's see the rest of the game, and then it'll be easier to offer maybe some comments on the team building here. But it doesn't get the Body Slam again. I don't think even getting it would have made enough of a difference at this point, because you're still getting pressured by Psychic and Ice Beam. Articuno. So, okay, so there's no T-Wave on this whole team. There's one Stun Spore user, and that's your entire paralysis spread here. Not to be overly critical, but I just think that's a huge team building error. You need some kind of support for these things. Ultimately, the team choice reduced her to fishing for freeze when there were better ways to win this, but Unowndragon got there first. Just to like kind of balance this out, I do have to say that Unowndragon's team is not something I'm a huge fan of myself either. I think just you need a little more aggression than this. Like either set up for a Mew with sweeper moves to win, which by how this was played, I don't think that's what this was, or run like a more aggressive Mewtwo set, put Blizzard on it, put something like that on it. Even just switching Ice Beam to Blizzard would have gone a long way here and actually doing some damage before you end up in that freeze fish situation. But like his team is more of a solid team than 5 attackers, no T wave, super vulnerable to a lot of things. So evens it up at 1-1. And on we go to the next one. Game 3. Jolteon lead, a bit out there versus a Tauros lead. So this is interesting. Could click T-Wave, or should click T-Wave, and Tauros could have stayed and just fought this, but goes to Egg. Now, Jolteon in the lead could be running Sand Attack, could be running Pin Missile, could be running lots of things. If there's Pin Missile, you definitely click it here. And Cake pivots to Golem, so another Golem coming out. Taking T-Wave on the Egg, the intention there is to block sleep from opposing Executor. It's a bit of a gambit because like some people have run like back Jinx or something like that that can actually pressure Executor and still get the sleep anyway. But here it seems like it's going to work out, and now Cake has a good sleep block set up. Unowndragon going to Egg, hopefully going to double out to something that pressures the opposing Egg. No double, just taking the damage, and now probably going to sack Jolteon to sleep because it's obviously the most useless thing here with a Golem there. And we won't know what Cake clicked. Probably another double back to Egg here. No double back, just taking a double kick. Don't love that. Even a crit wouldn't have done that much damage, but I understand being a little bit worried. And double kicks again, predicting the Egg to come in here and like double on Unowndragon's Egg, I guess. But there's really not any reason that Cake can't just click a button with Golem with that paralyzed Egg there. So now this looks kind of awful for Unowndragon. I don't really love this. I like T-waving turn 1 is fine, and you can always predict that the opposing side's just going to have a rock ground there to stonewall the Jolteon right after. Calling out the Egg on clicking Psychic instead of clicking Sleep Powder here, and now Unowndragon probably going to get out to Jolteon. Cake correctly clicking Psychic again because it's a pretty obvious switch to Jolteon coming in, and now pivoting to Mewtwo, which I think is a really nice call out here. Now that the Egg is chipped a little bit, it can't really even pretend to switch into Mewtwo, and Golem obviously not really going to do well into Mewtwo. This will be a chance to fire off an attack or something. So far, the team's not saying too much. Cake's team just looks like pretty standard, like physical offense stuff, but subbing in Golem over Rhydon could really be anything depending on what the Mew and Mewtwo are. Unowndragon's team, who knows, but I would bet you that this is going to be another Ice Beam Psychic Mewtwo just because that's what he likes to run. Cake this time telegraphing a T-Wave Mew, which thank goodness after that last game. And there's the wave, yeah. It would be really something if she didn't bring any T-Wavers a second time in a row. But this time, yeah, makes sense. T-Wave, Earthquake, probably Swords Dance Soft-Boiled Mew with a Golem to cover for Zapdos. Probably her last two are just Snorlax and Mewtwo. Could be something else instead of a Snorlax, but like just running Snorlax is pretty standard or run good physical attackers gameplay. We'll see. So here, going straight to Golem seems like a bit of a looking at the Jolteon saying, okay, it's at 50% paralyzed. I have lots of stuff that hits it. I'm just going to use the Golem to go on the offense now and then boom something. So trading Earthquakes, Unowndragon probably strongly considering going into Jolteon on boom now. Cake probably just rips it here anyway. Yep. But ultimately, like, you got decent damage on the Snorlax and you made it get out. It's a pretty good outcome for the Golem. Now Egg in and Tauros in. Cake has no reason not to just go back to Executor here, and there's a double from Unowndragon. That's interesting. So not going to Mewtwo, not risking that, and that makes sense. Like getting Snorlax in with the Golem down and just being able to click Boom on something is pretty alright. Even just booming this Tauros for 90%, pretty good. So pretty solid double. I actually like that. Removes a lot of the threat in Cake side. Now this Tauros has to get out. And hopefully we're not about to see another freeze war. I understand not going to Mew because it's 75%. You kind of can't take the hit. If this isn't a T-Wave Mewtwo, we might have another Ice Beam War on our hands, and I really don't like that. But Unowndragon going to Mew suggests T-Wave, and Cake has a T-Wave Mewtwo. Okay, so with that double T-Wave reveal on Cake's side, I am going to guess the last is also just like a Snorlax. Maybe it could be something sweepy like an Articuno. Either one kind of makes sense. On Unowndragon's side, probable T-Wave Mew, probably normal Mewtwo. I think with Unowndragon, like it's a lot harder to sort his teams into just like hard archetypes because it just seems like he always plays the same Mewtwo sets, which makes it a bit hard to guess anything off of them. It's just like standard bring good sets, but I don't think there's necessarily a synergy between them. So last could be anything. Could be a Tauros, a Zap, probably not a Zapdos because there's a Jolteon, but some people like that double electric type idea. Now, finally, Unowndragon gets forced to concede sleep to the opposing egg. Hopefully switches out. No, but burning that turn might lose the game. If this is like Amnesia Blizzard Mewtwo, which it very well could be, then this is going to get a KO. I think that telegraphs that it is, and this Mew is screwed. It will get the T-Wave for that, though, as long as it doesn't para. But like now, you're just in a bad spot. Having to give up a whole Mew for one T-Wave. I think this one's slipping out of Unowndragon's hands. And it's a Golem, so that does make sense. T-Wave Mew, probably T-Wave Earthquake Mew, Executor, Jolteon. So there's like a decent bit of para support for it. Don't know if I love Golem here, though. Like, I'd probably pick something more aggressive like a Tauros. Golem feels like maybe just a little too much special frailty against Blizzard on this one team. You don't really have any option to switch into Ice Beam. And to be fair, same thing goes for Cake's team here, but we don't know her last yet, so it could be a little less vulnerable to ice moves, but this doesn't look great. Golem booming would still lose the game here, so just has to hope for some paralysis. It is kind of interesting not choosing to sub up or anything, but I guess like Executor could come in and force it out. But even then, like I think you probably would want to sub and just hope the Executor paralyzes a couple times while you beat it down with Rock Slide, Body Slam, whatever you have. Now I just don't love Unowndragon's odds because probably Cake is going to T-Wave this and then immediately boom, and then it's just a lot of pressure. I don't think there's really a way out. Like you have to kind of have to call it here with going to Egg. Yeah, didn't call it. Now it's a guaranteed loss. There's no way out. Tauros is just going to come in and threaten to finish this. Going Egg first is weird. I guess like you want to click the explosion first, but honestly, I don't see a reason not to just go to Tauros and just rip the Hyper Beam and see if that hits first, because that would end the game. Egg obviously is slower, no 25% from Mewtwo, so now here comes the Tauros to actually finish the game, it looks like. And we won't know what Cake's last is. So Cake's team looks horribly vulnerable to Articuno, but the last might patch that up. Hard to give much of a critique because, like, honestly, these are pretty good mons, even if I think Golem is still just worse than Rhydon. And the sets on the Mew and Mewtwo could suggest a lot of things. Two T-Wavers could suggest another physical attacker, could suggest like a wrap clicker last. Who knows? There's a lot of viable options in Ubers. Unowndragon's team, I think just like Jolteon, Golem, T-Wave, Earthquake, Mew, and then like the old standard Mewtwo set is just a little too slow when you combine it with an Egg and a Snorlax. Not a lot of speed on this team, no ice resistance. Not enough aggression to suppress an opposing Blizzard Mewtwo before it just clicks Blizzard T-Wave Boom on everything. So I do think there was a bit of a team builder difference in these. I think aside from the Game 2 team, Cake probably brought better teams overall. Still not sure so much about the golems on these, kind of just tabbing through all the teams really quick. Yeah, I think Unowndragon maybe stuck a little bit too much to older concepts and they just didn't really work out here. Ultimately, I think that was kind of the decider. And on Unowndragon definitely had the advantage a couple times and very much could have won this set. I think could have won every single game in this set, honestly, but just gave up too much momentum with a couple of plays that were too slow at some points. And that is kind of a product of the teams, but I think they were winnable games. But ultimately, Cake wins 2-1, and that's the end of the set. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. As always, feel free to leave me any feedback in the comments or on Discord. Let me know about anything that you think I might have missed, and I'll see you in the next one.